Good afternoon. I'm State Representative John Yates, Chairman of the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee, and our very able gentleman here, he's the Ways and Means normally, but Mr. Betts is our assistant who keeps up with things here and keeps us straight. And y'all want to tell who you are? We'll start down there.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Brian Thomas, represent District 100 in Gwinnett County.
All right, thank you.
Scott Holcomb, District 81, Gwinnett and DeKalb counties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Pizzold, District 133, parts of Muskogee, Harris, and Troup counties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Ernest Smith, District 125, Augusta, Georgia.
It's good to have all of you with us. It's good to have all y'all with us today to listen to the presentation of two bills. But first, we're going to approve the committee rules, same as last year, and I sent y'all one in advance so you could have a chance to look them over. If everybody's had read them, I'd entertain a motion on that.
Good.
All in favor of the rules as stated, as shown, say aye. Aye. They're approved, and we'll move on now to the first bill. I believe it's my good friend Representative Sims has the first bill. So come on up, my friend, and tell us about your bill.
Am I on? Okay. Members of the committee, this bill is the result of some controversial issues that have come up. Chairman Yates, you remember those issues that came up. Yeah. And what this amounts to is how an attorney, not attorney general, but how an adjutant general is appointed. Now, I probably need a show of hands. How many of you, besides Mr. Yates, have ever served in the military? Okay. So you know how the military rank structure runs. You know, you don't jump from lieutenant to major, and you don't come into the Army as a lieutenant colonel, and you don't do those kinds of things. Well, this is a bill to redirect the way a adjutant general is appointed by the governor. I'm not taking anything away from the governor's appointment. I think they should have that right to appoint whoever they want as the adjutant general. He is the commander of all troops in the state of Georgia, and it is a general officer that does command. It is a 2-star rank. And in order for that to happen, and again, this is in no way retroactive. This doesn't affect the way anybody that's in office is now or is serving now at any point in time. But from henceforth and always, what this bill says is that in order for that person to be considered as an adjutant general, they have to be federally recognized, either have been or retired as a general officer. And that means, let me try to explain that to some folks that do not understand what a federally recognized general officer is and what has to happen. The rank structure usually goes from second lieutenant to bird colonel, which is a full colonel. At that point in time, there has to be several schools and several different criteria and several different commands that individual would have to handle. First of all, as a lieutenant, you come in as a second lieutenant unless you're commissioned as a captain. And there are certain branches of both the Air Force and the Army and the Marine Corps and the Navy for that matter, but for general purposes, this will only affect the Air Force and the Army in this instance. You can come in as a captain if you're a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist or any subspecialty thereof. Sometimes nurses come in as captains also if they're PAs or nurse practitioners. They can come in as a captain. But other than that, you usually are commissioned as an officer in the United States Army or Air Force as a second lieutenant. At that point in time, you have to have some schooling. You have to have the Unified Officer Basic course for both your branch, whatever you branch qualify. and that could be infantry, armor. I was in the Army, so I branch qualified engineers. At that point in time, after you do your basic course, then you are placed in a lieutenant's position, which usually is a platoon leader or an assistant to on a staff. Usually you run one of those two instances, but eventually along the way you have to concern yourself, and you have to serve as a platoon leader. It is not considered a command at that point in time, but it is a button you must punch. At that point, after that, you're promoted to first lieutenant. And most first lieutenants then are assigned as an executive officer in a company or as a staff officer on a battalion staff. At that point in time, you start looking at your advanced course. And that is the advanced course, the United States Army Air Force, and you go to that advanced course based on your branch and based on your branch qualifications. After you finish that branch course, you come back and you finish another called Command College, and that is a new instance. I didn't have to do that, but it is a new structure that they put in for commanders, and it's the first time you serve as a company commander is when you're a captain. And you wear the railroad tracks, and that makes you the old man of the outfit. Okay, it's not really truly you're the old man, because usually you have a first sergeant and platoon sergeants that have served longer than you have. They're there to guide, you there to command. At that point in time, you go to your CAS Cube course, which is command and staff, not command and general staff, but it is a staff position so that you can go to the rank of major. You will be serving as a major if you make the rank requirements and you become a field grade officer. That is a very, very, very big step in your career from going from a line officer to a field grade officer. At that point in time, you become a major and you go to the Command and General Staff College out at Leavenworth, Kansas, and which is something that you have to do in order to make the next rank up, which is Lieutenant Colonel. Now, in order to become a colonel and then on to general, there is another course that you have to have, which is called War College. And if you're promoted above rank into the War College, then you are going to be a general officer at that point in time. But you have to go to the War College at that point in time if you want to remain in the Army or the Air Force. That is the basic concept of the schooling that you have to have. Along the way, you have to have several commands. In order to become a general officer, you have to have command. Now, I'm not an Air Force, so I don't know all the commands of the Air Force, but in the Army, I know you have to have a company command, a battalion command, and either regimental or brigade command in order to even be considered and federally considered as a general officer. You have to have that much time. And that command time is very, very important. If you haven't had that, and you haven't had the staff time to go with it to learn the logistics, because half the battle is the logistics fight, knowing where to put people and how much to get there, and then learning how to maneuver those troops on the battlefield and making sure that happens is an extremely, extremely hard job to have to fulfill. And what this does, ladies and gentlemen, is it gives that person who has come up through that rank and has done this and has been overly and overly promoted by people that know command structure, that understand the military, and becomes what we know as a general officer. It is not a captain in command. It is not a lieutenant colonel in command of all the troops in Georgia. And I will explain that to you in this way. It is a morale factor. And a morale factor is a very, very big thing in the military. And I'm going to tell you that this will help a lot of situationals. And there are general officers all over this state that will back me up on it. I didn't ask them to come today because I brought the bill up here. I want you to ask me any questions that you would have, and I'll stand for Mr. Chairman at this time for any questions you have for the bill.
Yeah, before I do that, I'd like to ask these two gentlemen to identify yourself for the audience.
I apologize for being a little late. I'm John Deffenbaugh, District 1.
And I'm Bill Hitchin from District 161.
And there's one more. If you'll identify yourself when you're seated.
Anderson from the 92nd District.
Thank you very much. I want to elaborate just a little bit on what happened, what brought us to this point. I think it's because we got a number of new members. Last year, we passed a bill that changed the situation of how long you got to serve in the National Guard before you can be, it wasn't the Adjutant General that we were discussing that time, it was the Assistant Adjutant General. So we have, and of course it was not retroactive, what was passed. So what the governor, his appointment stood as it was. But I just wanted to say that. Tell me a little bit, I think the two generals that testified last year, you served with them in Iraq?
I did serve with them in Iraq, yes, sir.
Yeah, Iraq, not Afghanistan?
In fact, yes, sir, I did. And both General Thielman and General, I don't, was the other General?
General Moore.
General Moore, I actually served with General Moore also.
Yeah.
He was artillery. General Thielman was infantry. I served both. I was an engineer. So
I just added that so that everybody would know the background of where we are.
And understand, ladies and gentlemen, I have as much command time as our Adjutant General now.
Okay. General Thielman, one of them is, he's from my county, and exactly. I know him quite well. Is it, everybody's questions? Yeah, Representative Thomas is first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Sims, I certainly remember this bill coming up last year and supported your efforts on the floor that were ill-fated. But from a practical perspective, can you give us some sense of how limiting that might make the pool of prospective adjutant generals?
Well, it's like this, and I'll say this: the pool of adjutant generals. I'm not giving, if the governor of this state in the future wants to take a regular Army officer from any rank as what we call a promotable colonel. At that point in time, he's federally recognized and ready for promotion. He has that pool of officers throughout the United States. How many that recognizes, I have no idea. But he can take that, or the officers from the inside of the state. But he has that pool of officers to choose from. Mm-hmm. But you have to understand, each one of those officers has done the time, and they have been there and served the time that they need to have the schooling and the logistical know-how, the logistical knowledge, and the command knowledge. The command knowledge is by far more important, in my opinion, than anything else. Having that time and command that they understand troops and understand the significant battle skills that these folks have to have, and the evaluation of those battle skills, and putting people in harm's way. We put people in harm's way every day. My unit just left Douglas, going to Afghanistan. So, I say my local unit, the one that I commanded in Desert Storm. So I understand how important this is, and I know what it amounts to. And when you're talking about 165 people, that's one thing. When you're talking about 4,000, like a brigade that's mobilized and sent, that's another. And it's huge amounts. And that's why they don't let captains command brigades. That's why they don't let lieutenants command divisions, okay? That's why colonels and generals are demanded in those positions, because they have the experience, the knowledge, and the education to do it. But they do have that pool all over all the United States. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask, make a statement and ask a question. In World War II, when I served, a division commander, 15,000 men, was a major general.
That's correct.
And as I understand now, it's kind of standard with the states. The governor can pick the person to be adjutant general, but it's kind of standard that he's a major general normally.
Well, I mean, he could be a brigadier general, or he could be a colonel promotable, to brigadier general, and then he could, he would probably be serving still as an active member, and then serve as a lieutenant, as a major general at that point in time. A lieutenant general, it is not a lieutenant general slot, so I don't think a lieutenant general would be a viable candidate, even though he would be, it would be past his rank and grade at that point in time to serve as an adjutant general.
All right, we have another question here. Go ahead, my friend.
Chairman Sims, appreciate you being here today. I want to touch base on, I think you sort of addressed this, where we crossed out, said no person shall be eligible to hold the office of adjutant general unless he or she holds or has held a commission of at least the federally recognized rank, and then we took out the field grade or the equivalent and substituted the word general there. Does that eliminate the full bird colonels?
No, no, no. It says field grade or equivalent in the organized militia of the state.
Okay.
The organized militia of the state is not the Georgia Army National Guard or the Georgia Air National Guard.
I understand that.
And that is where a lot of the problem has come from.
Okay. But you're saying that this person has to be a federally recognized general in the armed forces. Does that eliminate
a colonel?
Promotable colonels?
A promotable colonel would be federally recognized. He would be able to be promoted to the general.
Okay,
the general
word general
rank
just threw me off. Okay.
The general rank, a colonel promotable, and if you want to make that as a bracketed definition, if you want to amend that, I would stand for an amendment to that to make it clearer. But for your purposes, a general officer is a colonel promotable. That's a COL with a P at the end of his name. That means he's been to the War College and is up for promotion to the Congress of the United States. All general officers have to be approved by the Senate.
And then the second part of that is I guess the military protocol, the chain of command. The governor is the commander-in-chief.
Yes, he is the commander-in-chief.
And I understand the situation that we got into before. But I also want to make certain that we preserve the integrity of the governor being able to appoint.
We're not taking anything away. And again, this is not a retroactive bill at all. This does not go to effect. This is from henceforth on appointments. This does not have anything to do with the present people that are in office or the present people that are serving. Has no effect on them whatsoever. But from henceforth, when a general, an adjutant general is to be appointed, at that point in time, the pool must be those officers that are promotable or already general officers.
In order to clarify some of this, when we talk about the promotable colonels or whatever, you say you would be willing to amend or whatever?
Yes, sir, I would.
So we could.
If that would make it easier for you to understand, but honestly, if it's a colonel promotable, he's going to be promoted to that rank more than likely.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to clarify the whole
But he has
thing.
to have a position. Understand there has to be a position for him to go to. The pyramid of general rank is very, very limited, okay? It is very limited. You don't have that many generals running around. They're very limited in number. The reason for that is because over the years, either you retire or you're rifted out.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on, or you don't make the grade, and there's a reason for that. Either you didn't have the education requirements, or your command quality was not that good, or your logistics quality was not that good. I mean, it takes a very, very special officer to become a general officer. Very special officer. One that has both the respect of his troops and the respect of his peers. It's a very, very, very special rank.
Well, my father-in-law was brigadier general.
I understand that, sir, and I respect that. And I guarantee you he didn't get that by not going through this process.
And he is a Citadel graduate, by the way, also.
And understand where my background, for those folks that do not know, I am a Citadel graduate. I was a commissioned officer. I served in Iraq, and I also served in other places around the state. I was also mobilized during the flood of '94. So I've had both the civil side of the issue and the military and the combat side. So I understand both, and it is very, very special officers. There's nothing like getting eaten out, as we used to say, or chewed out by a colonel. But if a general chews you, you've got a little bit of a problem. I've been chewed out by some of the best. That's why I'm a captain. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Betts is working on a proposed amendment. If you want to wait just a minute,
I'll be glad to, Mr.
We'll
Chairman.
see. You want to say something on this subject? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Representative Sims. I appreciate what you're doing, and I certainly understand also where you're coming from. Do you know how other states handle this? Have you done a survey?
Well, most other states. Now, I can't answer for every state. I know the state of South Carolina elects theirs. He's an elected official, and that's always a little bit of a catastrophe over there because a light colonel can actually run for the office, but it's usually colonel promotable, but they have had some that were not colonel promotable, and they've had some issues over there. But that goes back to South Carolina politics from way, way back. I know that because I went to the Citadel and I understand that. I've always felt like for the years and years and years, I've never seen, other than a general officer, ever be appointed to this. In the history since 1980, when I came in as a lieutenant, I've never seen anything but a general officer appointed into that position, ever, until now. That's a long time. So I've either been serving the state or serving my nation for 32 years.
Right.
All right. Representative Thomas has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Sims, I've only served on active duty. I've not been in a National Guard unit.
Yes, sir.
So I don't have a very clear understanding of the role of Adjutant General. So let's say a National Guard entity is activated and is deployed. Wouldn't they fall under the command of active duty chain of command at that point?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're their own command. They have their own. It depends on. There's all kinds of ways of being activated. You could be activated as an attachment, which yes, you would be attached to a unit that would basically handle all your needs, your logistical needs, your administrative needs, or any needs that you may have. You could be OPCON, which means you have your own diversity, but your operation connected to another unit, but you're basically under your own command. You can go basically as just a unit that is there. In fact, that was one of the ways that I was deployed. I was deployed. The Adjutant General was my commander. Well, actually, he didn't sign my OER. The
Evaluation.
My OER was signed by the group commander. That I was in an engineer group, so the group commander, who was a general also, signed my OER. But he would be my senior rater. But I wasn't a field grade officer either. But that being said, it depends on how you're mobilized, what your needs are, and what the situation is. In a combat situation, such as a brigade, they will be a brigade. If a brigade was mobilized, like the 48th Infantry, the 48th Infantry Brigade in Georgia, which is an infantry brigade, if they were mobilized as a unit, 4,000 troops, they would be assigned to a division.
Right. So I guess the reason I'm asking this, I'm trying to understand what role the Adjutant General plays in deployment circumstances,
it depends on. And again, I'm not a general officer, so I can't describe that. I just know that you fall in line and go. But they sign the paperwork, they make the assignments. They're in charge of of everything logistical for that unit until it gets to its destination, and to get them back home, they're also in charge. And when they go into the other parts of redeployment or to be undeployed, to get back into the civilian world, they're in charge of all that also, which is it's a huge operation. It is a very, very complicated operation too, because right now we have troops that are coming back and going, leaving and going all the time, both Air Force and Army.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Yates. Chairman Sims, with respect to the federal designation under Title 10, if the Adjutant General is not somebody who has a rank that is federally recognized, what are the implications of that in terms of how they perform their duties?
I can only give you opinion because I've never served in that role, and I've never served as a staff officer on that staff. But I will give you an opinion. Honestly, the adjutant general that's appointed that is not federally recognized cannot wear his uniform in the Pentagon as a general officer. He would be impersonating a general officer, which is a violation of the UCMJ. You cannot do it. He is a civilian that walks in. That's basically what it amounts to. And that is the key behind the respect of other generals. You know, you wearing a uniform down here, flying all over the place as a general, and you're really not a general officer. That's you can't be. I mean, if you don't make the grade and you're not federally recognized, you're not a general officer.
So just to make sure that I understand, when I left active duty, I was a captain. If, let's say,
And thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you. If Governor Deal in his infinite wisdom tapped me to be the adjutant general, if I were to go up to Washington, D.C. to try to visit with the Pentagon, I would have to dress just as I am right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
To answer your questions, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Rogers has a concern.
No, it's not concerned. I guess it's one of those things where it just kind of, I didn't realize we were going to be meeting today until about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. And the whole thing just kind of came up.
Well, we had a notice the other day.
Did we?
Yeah.
Well, the chain of command didn't get to me, which was probably my fault. I guess I'd like some time to think about it and to ask some questions and to talk to some people. And we're looking at an amendment on the possible amendment on the thing. Mr. Chairman, would you be amenable to possibly tabling this and coming back, giving some more time to
I'll
think about it?
give you whatever it's up to the committee. I always stand with the committee.
Right.
My ego's not that big.
No, well, I just want to make certain you're okay with it. I mean,
the issue that I think you're probably going to run, and I'm sure that the governor's office may not approve of this because they don't want to admit that there may have been a mistake in the appointment. And they didn't want to make it last year. And I can tell you that when I fought it on the floor, it was a very, very close vote. And they came to see me about it, and they were concerned, and I just told them what my thoughts were. And I think it's a morale problem. I still think it's a morale problem. And I think the longer you wait, and if you see this, the longer you wait on it, the morale still becomes a little bit of a. And there's been some issues since then. I'm not going to go into those.
Sure.
And again, this does not affect those people that are in those appointed positions now. It only affects those later. And it won't affect this governor now. It will only affect those later.
And I appreciate that. I guess from my perspective, when you talk about the morale problem, I want to make certain, first and foremost, it's paramount that the morale out of our troops is there. And I guess I'm just, from my perspective, I just want to ask some questions and make certain I'm comfortable before I cast a vote on something like this that does affect the morale of the troops. And I just need to ask some questions. But I mean, it's up to this committee as to whether they would want to table it or not.
Well, I can denote this, and I hate to use one of the examples of members of the committee, but I can guarantee that Colonel Hitchens, when he was on the state patrol, didn't want somebody that was right out of school to become the colonel of the state patrol. And the same thing holds true for anybody that's sitting in office or sitting in a position in a foxhole somewhere. They want to make sure that the officers appointed over them actually have the wherewithal to command them. And I can tell you that older NCOs will tell you quicker than anything that a bad officer can really, really make a difference in what you're doing in battle. And it can make a big difference in what happens when you get back from battle. And who's sent and who's not sent, okay? Those are very, very, very big issues.
Yes, sir. And I agree with you on that, besides the fact that I've got a father-in-law who's a retired brigadier general. I also grew up the son of a chief master sergeant in the Air Force. I didn't have a chance.
I understand.
But and that's why I think I'm so cautious about this thing. I can't quite get my
Well,
hands
talk to your
around
father-in-law about it and see what he thinks.
I tell you, he's 93 years old, and believe me, he'll still give you an opinion.
How's that?
But
That's not old.
no, sir. He's 93 years young. Let me put it that way. And I don't know what the rest of the committee would be, as far as like tabling it to think about it. So I'll just sort of leave it there and let anybody else weigh in.
Representative Puzo has a question. As
Is that me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question about the situation in South Carolina. You said that the adjutant general is elected.
That's correct.
Do they have to meet the certain requirements in order to be eligible?
There are some requirements. I do not what they are. Representative Peasley, I don't know the requirements.
Okay.
I think they have to meet the rank of lieutenant colonel or above. I think that's one of the requirements. There are several of those. If you were promotable above grade, do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay, being promotable above grade, a light colonel can go to the War College.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's colonels and above that go. A light colonel can go if he's in a grade, if he's promotable above grade, which means he's going to be a super duper trooper. And they end up going. Most people that are general, well, I know if you're a general officer, you have to be at the War College, and that's one of the requirements.
Okay.
Among other those command requirements.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is just a, wait. Oh, I'm sorry.
Representative Sims.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Smith.
Yes, thank you so much. Just as a point of clarity, as a former aviation officer in U.S. Air Force, is this more about leadership as opposed to politics? It appears that we're
Yes,
talking
sir.
about
And
responsibility.
as you know, there's no place for politics when you've got men in battle. That's the political side of the house. I will never doubt that the commander-in-chief is the president of the United States, and I'll never doubt that the commander-in-chief of the state forces is the governor of the state. That's the way it is. That's the way our Constitution is. But the people that lead them are military officers that are professionals, men and women who have served their time, who have done those things to become professional officers. And to be professional, they have to meet those requirements. And, just because you're somebody's friend or somebody's good buddy or whatever, that is not a place for that kind of stuff to go on. Not when people's lives are at stake at all hours of the day and night. And these people right now today are sitting in a foxhole somewhere or in an air base somewhere or on a ship somewhere waiting, for somebody to say, okay, you go and give your life to us. I want to know that if they're going to be doing that the officer in charge of them is absolutely qualified to take them there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You about the tabling? Is that what you?
Well, no, I want to ask a question.
Okay, go ahead.
And this has nothing really to do with the subject matter. I was just reading the bill, and I know that, see that Mr. Bundrick is here. Maybe you can answer this. What's the rationale behind the candidate for adjutant general putting up the $10,000 bond?
I have no idea, sir. I mean,
Maybe Mr. Bundrick.
I guess it's because he does have some jurisdiction for monies. That there's probably some monies that he is in charge of, which most of that will go through USPFO and all those things. And I don't know if you know what all that is, but those are the folks that do the payment and any collections of monies. But you have to also understand that he also signs for a lot of equipment. I know when I was a captain, I found out what my signature was worth. It was worth about $9.5 million at one time, and even more.
You want
than
to
that
co-sign
now.
a note with me, Chuck?
And then when I actually went in a combat situation, I signed for stuff that I didn't write. It was well over $100 million. So when you start talking about tanks and personnel carriers, and the battalion commander signs for all of that, then a division commander signs for all that stuff, it's huge, and I guess that's where the bond comes from.
I guess where I am on the thing right now is, like I said, it's maybe my fault. I just really haven't had a chance to get my hands around it. And there's two things in play here. One is obviously the morale of the troops and what we're doing there. I want to make certain we make the right decision. And the second thing is that it's the integrity of this committee, because we went through this last year on doing some things. I want to make certain we're not backing up, going forward, or whatever, or that we're just clarifying. I'd just like a little bit of time from my perspective to think about it. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we table it for the time being, and then come back and give us a little bit more time to clarify some things. So I'll put a motion on the floor if you'll accept it.
All right. Who seconded?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion of that from any members? Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I mean, every member has to make up their mind, obviously, and I have. But I'm just curious, what information is it that the committee might hope to get that isn't apparent in the bill right now, or is it, just a matter of wanting to understand the views of some non-committee members? I guess that's my question on why the tabling.
From my perspective, I just don't want to rush into a decision. I want to talk to a couple people. I want to talk to a couple military people. I want to talk to Chairman Sims a little bit more. I just want some information for me personally.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and address the committee, this is not an attempt to one-up the governor for me. Okay, I understand that my basic concept
Not
of
an
this,
attempt to do what?
it's not to one-up the governor and trying to
Yeah,
undo what he's
understand.
doing. I'm not trying to. That's not my intention at all. I'm trying to put general officers that are qualified to take men into battle and to put men in battle and women into battle, and to make sure that they are the best that they can be. Because if they're not, then I've let my troops down, and I'm still an officer. I'm retired. I'm still an officer, and I've let those people down. That's my intent.
Well, the discussion we had last year was pretty primary. We thought, since it's National Guard troops, that they ought to have a certain amount of National Guard experience. That was the discussion last year.
Yes, sir.
You still feel strongly on that?
My feeling on this is, if you're a general officer or if you're a colonel promotable or general officer on active duty, you've got as much experience as anybody in the National Guard, or more, basically more, because you've served in an active duty position. That probably puts him in a position knowing more about anything at that point, in my personal opinion, because that's what he's done as a lifetime work. He's a professional soldier, professional airman, professional sailor, whatever that profession may be. When you're a professional, that's what you created, that's what your life's career is. And yes, they are going to be a lot more experienced and probably better for the job. I'm not suggesting that the governor not have the opportunity to appoint somebody off active duty or from another state for that matter, or whatever, if they've got the qualifications. I want him to put the best man or woman in that position for that job.
Any other questions about this particular part of it?
It's too important. A lot of the troops are too important.
Did you have a question?
No,
Okay.
of course it got answered.
Let's have a show of hands whether you want a table or not. Raise your right hand if you want a table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5. Is it 5 members? That motion will carry. Then
Okay.
we'll,
May I ask?
well, I should ask a question. I should have asked it earlier. You got any feelings on that?
On the table? No, sir. My question to you is, do I need to make a second request at some later time for the bill to come back up? I just need to know how.
Yeah, just tell me when you want to come up. We'll schedule it. We got
Okay,
plenty.
and if you'd like, I'll bring some officers up that will speak to the bill. If you would like, if the
Well,
committee.
that's always open.
Okay, I just
Anytime
wanted.
you wanna
I
do
didn't know
that.
if that was fair in the second.
Yeah.
On the second go.
Yeah, since we have not passed it, I mean, everything is open. We want to do the right thing and be sure we've got plenty of time.
And if anybody on the committee wants to ask me questions into my intent, and again, I want to reiterate this: this is not a one-up of the governor's office. This is not my attempt to do anything else. My attempt is to make sure that the lives of soldiers are always secure, and the officers that are appointed over them. And those officers need to be the best and most wonderfully trained people in the world, and they are. If you do the right thing, those are the things that is my major concern about this bill.
Do you have a suggestion as who he should contact for?
Well, there are several general officers that are around. I don't think they would mind for you to ask them. One is Stuart Rodeheaver here in Atlanta. He's a brigade commander and also in a long time serving in the Guard. One is Robin Hughes, who is a retired lieutenant general down in Macon. Lieutenant General Don Davis over in Byron, Georgia, would be another good example for somebody to talk to. General Bill Thielman down in Griffin, I've served with also. I think General James is one of them also, and
He didn't
there's
ask
several.
me for that.
There's several,
I don't know, but-
and if you ask me, I've got a list of people and they would be glad to come also. I think they held back. They wanted me to present the bill, see what you folks were thinking, and we'll come back if you want us to come.
For him. Yeah. Well, I'll wait for you to delve into this and whatever, and come tell me when you're through, and we'll have another meeting.
Well, I think that's for the whole committee to delve into, but yeah, from my perspective, I do want to clarify one thing. First of all, I appreciate your passion, Chairman Sims, about this, and I believe it's something that needs to be addressed. But I do want to clarify one thing. One of the things that came before us last year was and I think you addressed it just a second ago, was the National Guard aspect versus the regular services aspect. And it's my understanding you don't have a problem. I mean, the way it was last year, Colin Powell could not serve as the Adjutant General of the state of Georgia.
Well, he would be overqualified for one.
Right.
But you're right. He could. I mean, if he was a Major General, he could not have.
Right. But and one of the things we tried to do was to clarify that. But one of the concerns that was voiced by the generals last year was that the National Guard had a different attitude than regular service were. But from what you were saying a second ago, you feel like you're past that. You feel like a regular general officer or a colonel promotable in the regular services is fully qualified.
Yes, sir.
Without the National Guard experience.
Yes, sir. And I'm never going to state that otherwise. If you're a professional soldier, and I served on active duty and in the National Guard, I've been on both. And again, a professional soldier, if you made your life's career as a soldier or an airman, and you've done or a sailor, whatever you have done as a career, I mean, you definitely are going to have more experience than somebody that did it part-time. And I'm not saying that these part-time soldiers are not good. They're wonderful soldiers. They're great. And in fact, they can do two jobs. They're doing a civilian job and a military job, which is very important. But the truth is, a person that does it night and day is going to be a better trained and better qualified individual. Now, that being said, once you get 30 years in, it's getting toward the point that even the pyramid then, I'll say this, that you would never see anybody in the regular Army take a National Guardsman out to make a general officer, I doubt. Now, every now and then it happens. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but it's the rarity rather than the rule. And so the same situation would hold true, that people that know their troops and know their command also have an advantage. I'm not saying that a person out of the National Guard wouldn't have an advantage over somebody out of the regular Army, knowing the troops, and especially if they had been in command, if they had had a brigade command or group command here, they might know those troops a little better and know the situation better. There and again, it's the individual and the time. Usually, when you become a general officer, you have to be in the right place at the right time with the right qualifications. And that's usually basically it's a timing issue also. And having an open position, there are not that many. You have to understand that they're a very, very competitive world. And that competition is very, very, very keen, especially at the regular Army and regular Air Force level.
I appreciate that. I just want to make certain that we were past the National Guard.
I don't have an issue there. That's never been my issue. My issue has been putting the right people in the right place to make sure that troops get home.
I appreciate that, sir.
Well, I'll ask Representative Rogers when you feel comfortable to come back and let Mr. Sims, Representative Sims, know, and we'll schedule another meeting.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you, members of the committee, for putting up with me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yes,
thank you for your service. This next bill is, I told Representative Kuma, who's the author, that we'd be limited in time because we got to leave this room at the hour. And so he wanted to go ahead and lay it out so that we'd think about it and we'd come back later. Does that understand?
Or if you're satisfied,
Yeah, I mean, if you run out of time. Okay. Representative Kuma has House Bill 188.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, this bill stems from really two different areas. One is in the coming years, we're going to see a growth in the number of skilled trade positions in Georgia that are going to be unfilled. We're not going to have enough skilled trade people to fill the demand for skilled trades in Georgia. When I say skilled trades, I'm talking about plumbing, electricians, contractors, HVAC contractors, and the like. The governor's office has already begun to do what it can administratively to make skilled trade positions in Georgia available and attractive for military veterans. One example of that through the governor's Operation Workforce was to expand opportunities for military members who obtained military certification to drive heavy equipment to be able to get a CDL license in Georgia without having to go through the same process as other members of the community who might want to obtain a CDL. And so what this bill seeks to do is essentially add on to that in a very limited and measured way, but to add on to that to let veterans who either live in Georgia or who may be returning to Georgia have an opportunity to get their foot in the door in some of the entry-level areas of skilled trades in Georgia. And to that point, I would also add that Georgia currently has the 4th largest veteran population in the country by raw numbers, not on a pro rata basis by the population, but in raw numbers, we have the 4th largest veterans population. And in the next 2 years, we expect our veterans population to grow by about 80,000 more people. So what we want to do is tell veterans who are leaving the service or leaving active duty status that we want you to stay in Georgia. We want you to use the trades and the skills that you obtained and were certified for in your active duty status to work here in Georgia in these skilled trades. The bill is limited to only 4 categories of skilled trades at this time, and those 4 categories are general contractor limited, also to, excuse me, I lost my note here, general contractor limited, the entry-level positions for electrical contractors, plumbing contractors, and for heating HVAC repair contractors, or HVAC contractors. And essentially all we're doing through this bill is saying that if the people meet the certification requirements for their military service, then we're going to waive the initial written test for certification in Georgia. We're not waiving, we're specifically retaining any requirements that have to do with bonding or insurance or economic or financial ability to carry out their obligations. So we're not removing all of the requirements. We're simply saying if you've got a military certification, we accept that you have met or exceeded the standards for Georgia's testing certification as well. And the bill actually establishes that the Secretary of State's Division Director for boards and certifications will coordinate with the Governor's Office of Workforce Development to determine what those standards are, which military classifications would meet those standards, and implement those standards over time. The reason for that is to allow for the flexibility, because we all know, I think probably the majority of the members on this committee, as well as myself, are military veterans, and we know that military language and jargon and classifications and codes change sometimes without a lot of notice, and so it's important to give that kind of flexibility to the Secretary of State's office to keep up with those changing designations and changing terminology as that may arise in the future. That's the nutshell of the bill, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
I have a question. What is your reason for doing this? Is it to save money or time or what?
It is to allow veterans to be more quickly certified in those 4 areas by recognizing that their military certification and training is adequate to ensure the safety and the ability, their ability to do the job safely. It is designed to attract and keep military veterans in Georgia, and also designed to allow for more quickly filling those open positions that exist in the Georgia economy. We have. I mean, everybody knows how bad the economy has been, and they were trying to rebound. But even in that terrible economy, we have skilled trade positions in Georgia right now that are going unfilled because we do not have the skilled trade workers to do that. I've never met an impoverished plumber or a plumber who couldn't find work. So I mean, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but really the skilled trades positions they're good, solid paying, good paying jobs, and we want Georgia we want veterans to know we want you to stay in Georgia. We like your skill set. Aside from your certification, we like your history. We want you to stay here and make good citizens of you.
I attended the governor's meeting where we had industry coming in, and they were emphasizing truck drivers' skill in the armed forces is similar to what it is here. Is there any questions from any of the committee members? Representative Rogers.
Thanks, sir. Representative Coomer, I guess probably is it not fair to also say that a residual effect of this would be we're all extremely aware of trying to get our veterans that are coming back, our returning warriors back into the workforce as quickly as possible. And this eliminates some burdensome regulations and bureaucracy that they may get caught up in.
Right. It allows them to essentially skip the testing part. Some of these tests occur once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year. So rather than having a military member who has the certification in this field wait 4, 5, 6 months before they can even test, we're going to let them get certified without that initial testing. Now, I would have pointed out also that word initial. This is only for the first term of qualification. So if they're licensed in a field or certified in a field that requires an annual renewal, they'll have to renew through the normal process after the initial certification. If it's a 5-year renewal, when they come back for the renewal, whatever the requirements are, they'll have to meet all of the requirements. This is simply waiving that initial test.
And also probably a follow-up to that would be that, like I said, growing up, child of a military family, I realize the transition as it comes in. It would probably ease a lot of the financial burdens for families while they're waiting if they could go ahead and test and get into, not test, but go ahead and get their license and put them back in there, right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Holcomb is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Yates. Representative Coomer, I want to commend you on bringing forth this bill. I think it's an important bill, and I agree with everything that you've said in terms of the impact that it may have on our veterans community. And I want to just delve down into 2 issues which I think will be helpful to the committee members to hear. This also covers spouses who are here as well, correct?
That's correct, and I apologize. I failed to mention that in my introduction, but this would also provide the same opportunity for a military spouse who has a similar certification from another state, but who is present in Georgia by virtue of their spouse's assignment or operation here in Georgia. So it would also apply to those limited circumstances for spouses.
Thank you. And with respect to unemployment, sadly, the unemployment numbers for veterans, and particularly veterans of recent conflicts, has been much greater than that for the non-veteran population. Is it your expectation and hope that this measure will help reduce that unemployment level?
Absolutely. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. I was in the Air Force. My dad's a Marine. My brothers are both Army combat veterans, and their experience in particular was informative to me in this process. Both of them came back from Iraq, one of them after his 2nd deployment in Iraq, and frankly couldn't find work. Fortunately for them, they're smart enough guys to go back to school, but they were both on unemployment assistance for some time when they returned from active duty. You know, and sort of a tangential benefit will be, hopefully, will be cutting some of the people who need unemployment out by making them employable or getting them to work more quickly, which of course the bottom line of that is saving the state some revenue as well.
Thank you, Representative Coomer.
Somebody, you through. Is anyone? We got about to run out of time. I'm sorry to say, because when we set up this meeting, we only had 1 bill, and then we just, on this bill we said we would discuss it and put it out there and let people have a chance to discuss it and everything. So we, yes, oh, excuse me.
Chairman,
Representative
if it's the will of the committee, I'd like to make a motion that this do pass.
I'm not going to recognize that, and I'll tell you why. I received a call from the, my office did, from the heating and people, and they didn't get a notice of this, and I see one member out there, I believe, but I don't want to rush in anything here, so I won't recognize that at this time, because I think that we need to give more time to this. As I say, going into it, I told you that we would probably not have enough time to finish it, and I don't think it'd be fair to the other side. And I was going to ask the question if there's anybody out there in support of it, in addition to you, but we're about to, as I say, we have another committee coming in immediately, and so I'd appreciate it if somebody would make a motion to table it for the time being. Anybody so moved? Moved and seconded. All in favor of tabling this until short time later? All in favor, raise your right hand. How many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Have a majority. Yeah, I'm sorry to due to the time, but as I say, well, I wanted to hear this other one. It was been brought to me some time ago, and to have the meeting on the other representatives. So we'll have another meeting soon, in the next week or so, and when you tell me if you're ready again, and I'll check with the other side who feel pretty strongly on this, and we'll look forward to hearing from them at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So with that, we are adjourned.